Welcome to my YouTube channel. Hit the like button, share your thoughts, subscribe and tap the bell icon. The wallet was lying there, half buried in the sand, just feet away from the crashing waves. Mark's eyes narrowed as his foot scraped against it, the sensation of something soft, then hard. It was strange, the way it had caught his attention, almost as if the world had slowed down in that one moment. The sun beat down on the beach, reflecting off the water, but all Mark could see was the small black leather object half hidden in the sand. He'd been walking aimlessly along the coastline, trying to escape the pressure of his life, when he found it. His steps had been slow, as if the weight of his thoughts had been dragging him along with each footfall. But that moment, the second his shoe hit the wallet, pulled him out of his own head. It was the strangest feeling, like he had stepped into the middle of a story that was already unfolding. He froze for a second, unsure of what to do. His gut twisted, the familiar sensation of caution creeping up his spine. Should he pick it up? Should he just walk away? The wind ruffled his hair, and the sound of the waves crashing onto the shore barely registered. It felt like he was in a vacuum, only him and the wallet. No one else. No one to see. No one to hear. His heart raced faster than normal. What was it about this? Why was his stomach turning at the sight of it? It wasn't even the wallet that unsettled him. It was the way it had been left there, half buried in the sand, the way it almost seemed to have been waiting for him. His eyes darted back to the beach. There were only a few scattered tourists, people in the distance, the faint hum of voices too far to reach him. Nothing that seemed to warrant concern. Still, he couldn't shake the odd feeling that something was wrong. He stepped closer, crouching down and brushing the sand off with his hand. The wallet was small, but it had an expensive look to it, sleek black leather, smooth to the touch. His fingers hesitated as they hovered over it. He wasn't sure why he was even debating it. It was just a wallet, right? Someone probably dropped it and hadn't noticed. It wasn't like it was an unusual sight to see discarded things on the beach. Sand, seashells, and even the occasional pair of sunglasses had been left behind by vacationers before. But there was something off about this one. Mark's breath caught as he picked it up, almost in disbelief that it was now in his hand. He turned it over, inspecting it as though it would reveal some clue about who had left it. The sun reflected off the smooth surface, making it gleam, almost too perfectly. And then his eyes found the clasp. It wasn't just any wallet. There was something undeniably expensive about the feel of it, the weight of it. His fingers brushed against the leather, feeling the subtle imprint of something inside, something heavy, though it was mostly a sense of it rather than any visual confirmation. His heart was beating fast now. Was he being ridiculous? He needed to just open it. Find out what was inside. And yet, something about it gave him pause, something that tugged at him to be more careful, more cautious. His brain was screaming at him to leave it behind, to not involve himself in whatever mystery it was hiding. But his curiosity won out. He opened it carefully, slowly, as though the wrong move might set off some chain of events he couldn't control. The first thing he saw was money, thick stacks of cash, folded neatly, as if they had been placed there with a sense of precision. The bills looked fresh, crisp, like they'd just been withdrawn from an ATM or a bank. The sort of money that didn't belong on a beach. There was far too much of it, enough to make Mark's pulse race with the possibilities. He carefully moved the cash aside, his fingers now trembling as he flipped through the wallet. A few cards, credit cards, a driver's license, maybe a few business cards, flipped past his fingertips. But then, his eyes landed on something that made his stomach drop. A driver's license. The name on it read Victor Dawson. The man in the picture looked to be in his mid-40s, with neatly combed hair and a sharp jawline. His eyes were cold, distant, but the thing that struck Mark the most was the way the man looked. Nothing about him screamed ordinary. Mark had seen enough people in his life to recognize wealth when he saw it, but this man, this Victor Dawson, looked like someone who didn't belong in this part of the world. He didn't belong on a beach, not with the way his suit had been tailored so perfectly. Mark's fingers froze, clutching the card tighter. There was a sense of wrongness crawling over him, one that he couldn't explain. Was this a coincidence? Why had he stumbled upon something like this, at this moment, on this beach? It made no sense. People like Victor Dawson didn't end up on beaches like this. They didn't leave their wallets behind in the sand for some stranger to find. Mark stood up, his mind racing. He glanced around once more, eyes scanning the beach, looking for any sign that someone had seen him. He could almost hear his heartbeat in his ears, too loud, too fast. No one was around, at least no one close enough to matter. He was alone. But he didn't feel alone. He felt watched. His fingers closed around the wallet tighter, his knuckles white. What should he do? Should he keep it? Should he take it to the authorities? But what if there was more to this? What if someone was looking for it, someone dangerous? What if? A voice interrupted his spiraling thoughts. Hey, you! Mark's heart jumped in his chest, and he spun around, his hand instinctively moving to tuck the wallet back into his bag. He'd been caught, he was sure of it. The voice had come from behind him, sharp and insistent. It wasn't a passerby. It wasn't a tourist. The tone was too forceful, too commanding. Mark turned to face the person calling out to him, but no one was there. He stood still for a long moment, breath frozen in his throat. His eyes swept over the empty beach again. Nothing. No one. Only the sound of the wind and the distant waves. He exhaled, trying to calm the adrenaline rushing through his body. It was nothing. It had to be nothing. He was letting his imagination run wild. But then the voice came again. Hey, you! Stop! This time, it was much closer. Mark's heart slammed against his ribs. He spun around again, but before he could see anyone, a shadow crossed his path. It was a figure, tall and broad-shouldered, moving quickly towards him. Mark's body tensed, ready to react, ready to run. But his legs felt like they were made of lead, frozen in place. The man who appeared in front of him was no ordinary beachgoer. He wore a dark jacket that looked out of place in the heat of the midday sun. His face was hard, angry, with sharp features that seemed carved from stone. You took something that doesn't belong to you, the man said, his voice low, dangerous. He was too close now, his breath hot against Mark's face. Mark's eyes darted down to his hand, still clutching the wallet. His pulse thundered in his ears. He wanted to speak, to explain, but the words wouldn't come. What do you mean? Mark managed, his voice shaky. The man stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. Don't play dumb, he spat, his hand shooting out to grab Mark's wrist. You found it. And now, you're going to give it back. Mark tried to pull away, but the man's grip was like iron. He felt a cold, creeping fear in his stomach. He had no idea who this guy was, but he knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just some random person looking for a lost wallet. This was something far worse. Mark's heart was hammering in his chest as the man's grip tightened around his wrist. The heat of the sun felt distant now, overshadowed by the cold rush of panic that spread through his body. His fingers still clutched the wallet, but the man's hand was digging into his skin, unrelenting, as though he was not going to let go until Mark complied. Mark's mind raced, spinning in all directions. This wasn't just about a lost wallet anymore. It was something bigger, something he didn't understand, and his body was telling him that this situation had spiraled out of his control. He tried to pull his hand away, but the man's grip didn't budge. He was far stronger than he had any right to be for someone who appeared to be just another beachgoer. There was something menacing in his eyes, something that told Mark this wasn't going to end well if he didn't do what the man wanted. Let go of me, Mark said, his voice trembling despite his best effort to sound confident. His words were swallowed by the roar of the waves crashing against the shore. "Not until I get what's mine," the man growled. His voice was low and hard, like gravel scraping against stone. Mark's breath caught in his throat. He had to think, had to act quickly. Was it possible that the wallet was his? That would explain everything, wouldn't it? But the man had looked at him with such intensity, with so much anger. Mark wasn't sure anymore what was real and what wasn't. What he did know was that he couldn't just hand the wallet over without knowing what he was up against. "I don't know what you're talking about," Mark said, trying to pull free once more. His heart was pounding in his ears. The wallet was still clenched tightly in his hand. He didn't know why, but something in him refused to let go. The man's eyes narrowed, and his grip tightened again. Mark felt his pulse thumping beneath the pressure. "You don't know," the man sneered. "That wallet is mine. And now you're going to give it back before things get ugly." Mark swallowed hard. I found it," he said. The words tumbled out of his mouth before he could stop them. "I found it on the beach." "It wasn't." "You found it," the man interrupted, his voice seething with frustration. "That's the problem, isn't it? You shouldn't have found it. You shouldn't have touched it." Mark's head spun. There was something so wrong in the way the man was talking. He couldn't understand why he was so furious over a wallet. And why did it matter so much to him that Mark had found it? The man stepped closer, pressing his body into Mark's, forcing him back with every step. Mark's instincts screamed at him to run, to break free, but the fear was paralyzing. He couldn't think straight. Everything around him blurred into a haze of confusion, fear, and adrenaline. "I'm not giving it to you," Mark said finally, his voice barely above a whisper, as though speaking the words would somehow make him braver. The man stopped, and for a moment, the silence between them felt deafening. Then, just as quickly, the man stepped back. His face twisted in a sneer of contempt, and for a brief second, Mark thought he might be let go. But the tension in the air remained, thick and heavy, like an impending storm. "You think you can keep it?" the man asked, his voice now dangerously quiet. "You think you can just walk away with what's not yours?" "I didn't know," Mark began, but the man cut him off. "No one knows anything. They never do." His words were sharp, each one deliberate. "But trust me, you're in over your head now. You'll regret it if you don't hand it over." Mark's mind raced. He had to get away. But how? There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The man was too close, his anger too palpable. Mark didn't know who this person was, and he certainly didn't know what he was involved in. The man was watching him closely now, and Mark noticed the look in his eyes. It wasn't just anger, it was something darker, something that chilled Mark to the bone. This man wasn't just some random person who happened to lose a wallet. There was more going on here, something deeper. "What do you want with the wallet?" Mark asked, desperate to make sense of it all. He couldn't just hand it over blindly. He needed to know why this was happening. The man took a slow step back, folding his arms. "Does it matter?" he asked coldly. "It's mine. That's all you need to know." Mark's eyes narrowed. He couldn't just let the man intimidate him. "You're lying," Mark said, his voice gaining strength. "Why don't you tell me the truth? Why does this wallet matter so much to you?" For a moment, there was silence. The man seemed to hesitate, as if he was weighing Mark's words. Then he smirked, a wicked, knowing smile that sent a shiver down Mark's spine. "All right," the man said, almost to himself. "I'll tell you the truth, then." Mark took a cautious step back, suddenly unsure of what to expect. The man's eyes flicked to the wallet Mark was still holding tightly in his hand, and Mark felt a surge of unease. This wasn't just about money. This was something bigger. The man took another step forward. "You've heard of Victor Dawson, haven't you?" The name hit Mark like a punch to the stomach. Of course he'd heard of Victor Dawson. The man was practically a legend in the business world, a real estate mogul known for his vast fortune, his lavish lifestyle, and his brutal methods of making enemies disappear. Victor Dawson wasn't just a wealthy man, he was a powerhouse, a name that people feared. And now, Mark was standing here, holding his wallet. Mark's thoughts raced. I know who he is," he said, barely able to breathe. "What does this have to do with me?" The man's smile twisted into something more sinister. "That wallet doesn't just belong to a millionaire. It holds secrets. Dangerous ones." Mark felt a cold sweat break out on his neck. "What kind of secrets?" The man's eyes gleamed. "You'll find out soon enough." But first, he reached out and grabbed Mark's wrist again. This time, his grip was like a vice. "Hand it over," the man demanded. Mark took a deep breath. He had to think. He couldn't just give it to this man. Something in him, deep inside, was screaming not to let go. But if he didn't, he had no idea what might happen next. "Please, just tell me what's going on," Mark said, his voice strained. The man laughed, low, almost mocking. "You don't get it, do you? You're already in it, Mark. Whether you like it or not." Mark froze. How did he know his name? Before he could react, the man yanked the wallet from Mark's grasp, the movement swift and forceful. Mark stumbled back, his mind still spinning. The man stood there, holding the wallet in his hand like it was the key to a door Mark had no business opening. But the man wasn't finished. He turned, and with a final glance, he looked over his shoulder at Mark. "You've made your choice," the man said. "But remember, it's never just about what's in the wallet. It's about what happens next." Mark stood frozen, his mind still reeling from what had just happened. The man was gone. Vanished into the crowd of beachgoers, leaving nothing but a trail of tension in the air. The wallet was no longer in his hands, but the weight of the situation hung heavy in his chest. It wasn't just the wallet, it was what came with it, what it represented, and how he had become entangled in something far beyond his understanding. His thoughts spiraled. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe properly. The world around him blurred as his brain tried to process the chain of events that had led him to this moment. He'd thought it was a simple find, a lost wallet on the beach. A small fortune in his hands for the taking. But now, he realized it was far more than that. The man's words echoed in his ears. "It's never just about what's in the wallet. It's about what happens next." What had he meant by that? What was next? Mark had never been involved in anything remotely dangerous, let alone in a scenario like this. He was just a guy who worked at a local cafe, trying to make ends meet. Now, his entire world had been turned upside down in the span of a few minutes. Mark's heart raced. His instincts screamed at him to leave the beach, to go home and pretend none of this had ever happened. But he couldn't. The curiosity gnawed at him, and deeper still, the fear that there was something far more sinister at play. He had already stepped into something, and backing out now might not be an option. He glanced around. The beach was still bustling with tourists, families, and friends laughing, playing, and enjoying the sun. No one seemed to notice the tension that had consumed him. It felt surreal, almost as if the world was moving on while he stood still, locked in a nightmare. Mark took a few unsteady steps towards the water, trying to shake off the dread creeping over him. But it was no use. His mind couldn't let go of the events that had unfolded. He had to know more about the wallet, about why it had mattered so much to that man. He had to find out what secrets were hidden in it, secrets that were now likely in the hands of someone dangerous. But the problem was, where to start? He couldn't go to the police. He barely even knew what he would say to them. He found a wallet, it had some money, and then a man showed up and said it was his? It sounded absurd, and no matter how much he wanted to forget about the whole thing, he couldn't. The man's words haunted him, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something catastrophic was waiting to unfold. There was only one thing he could do. Mark had to find the wallet again. Hours passed before Mark finally made a decision. He had gone home, tried to sleep, but the images from the beach kept invading his mind. The man's cold eyes, the sense of danger that seemed to hang around him, the cryptic statement about secrets, it was all too much to ignore. He had to know what was inside that wallet. And he wasn't going to stop until he found out. The next morning, Mark returned to the beach early, long before the crowds would arrive. He stood near the spot where he had first found the wallet, scanning the area as if the answers might be hidden in the sand. His heart pounded in his chest, a combination of anxiety and anticipation. He wasn't sure what he was looking for, but he had to try. As the sun began to rise higher, casting long shadows over the sand, Mark's eyes caught something glinting in the distance. At first, he thought it was just a trick of the light, but as he moved closer, the unmistakable outline of a wallet came into view. It was lying half-buried, like it had been dropped carelessly or discarded. Mark's breath hitched. This was it, the wallet. The same one he had seen in the man's hands. But now, it was here, just sitting in front of him, waiting for him to claim it once more. Without thinking, he rushed forward, his fingers trembling as they brushed the sand away, revealing the leather wallet beneath. His eyes locked on the item, his mind racing with possibilities. What was inside? Why had it been so important? What secrets could it hold? He hesitated for a moment, unsure if he should even touch it. But something inside him pushed him forward, and with a sharp intake of breath, he opened the wallet. Inside, there were stacks of cash, more money than Mark had ever seen in his life. The bills were crisp, freshly printed, and thick, enough to make anyone's head spin. But that wasn't all. There were also several cards, each one stamped with a name he didn't recognize, Victor Dawson. Mark's stomach dropped. That name. It was the same name the man had mentioned on the beach. Victor Dawson. The business mogul, the man who had built his empire from nothing. Everyone knew his name, and now it was staring back at Mark from these cards. The wallet was his. Or at least, it had been. But that didn't explain the secrets the man had mentioned. Mark flipped through the wallet with trembling hands. In addition to the cards and cash, there was an envelope tucked in the back. His fingers brushed against it, and the sudden coldness of the paper made his heart race even faster. What could be inside? He pulled it out, holding it carefully as if it might break apart in his hands. He opened the envelope, revealing a single piece of paper, folded neatly. Mark's hands were shaking as he unfolded it. The writing was scrawled hastily, as if written in a rush, but the words were clear enough. Don't trust anyone. Not even your closest allies. They will all betray you in the end. The only one you can trust is yourself. The deal is made. The money is yours. But remember, there are always consequences. Mark's blood ran cold. Who had written this? And why had it been in the wallet? He could feel the weight of it all pressing down on him. This wasn't just about a lost wallet. It was about something much larger, something dangerous. He had crossed a line when he picked it up, and now, he had no idea how to back out. As Mark stood there on the beach, the cool sea breeze brushing against his skin, a realization hit him with full force: this wasn't just about money. This was about survival. The man on the beach had known exactly what he was doing when he told Mark it wasn't about the wallet. The truth was much darker, much more dangerous than Mark had ever imagined. Mark felt a chill spread through his body as the final, terrifying thought crossed his mind: who else knew about the wallet? The weight of the envelope in Mark's hand seemed to grow heavier with each passing second. His heart pounded in his chest, and his mind was spiraling, trying to comprehend the message that had just been thrust into his life. The words on the paper: don't trust anyone. Not even your closest allies. They will all betray you in the end. The only one you can trust is yourself. Felt like a warning. A threat. Mark stared out at the ocean, his mind racing. The sun had risen higher in the sky, casting a warm golden hue over the beach. But it didn't feel warm. It didn't feel safe. Everything had changed since he picked up that wallet. He could still hear the man's voice in his head, the same cold, unrelenting tone that sent chills down his spine. You've made your choice. He had no idea what the choice was. He hadn't asked for any of this, hadn't asked to be thrown into the middle of some twisted game that seemed to involve a dangerous millionaire and secrets that weren't meant for him to uncover. But now, the deeper he dug, the more he realized there was no turning back. The man, Victor Dawson, if that was even his real name, was right. This wasn't just about a lost wallet. This was something far more dangerous. Mark folded the paper carefully and shoved it back into the envelope. He couldn't look at it anymore. He couldn't think about it right now. But he had to know more. He had to find out what was really going on. There were too many questions, too many pieces that didn't fit. And every time he tried to piece them together, he was left with a gnawing sense of unease. He turned and walked away from the beach, his footsteps heavy in the sand. The whole world felt different now. It felt like everything he had known, his quiet life, his job at the cafe, his modest apartment, was slipping away, replaced by a sense of uncertainty and fear. As he made his way back to his car, Mark's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, his hands shaking. It was a message, but there was no name attached. Only a phone number. Meet me at the diner on 5th and Oak. Midnight. Don't be late. Mark's heart skipped a beat. Who was this? Was it someone involved with the wallet? Or was it someone else who knew what he had found? He stared at the message for a long time, unsure of what to do. Part of him wanted to ignore it, to walk away and pretend this. Open it, the man said. And you'll understand why you're here. Mark stared at the envelope, his hands shaking as he reached for it. He didn't want to open it. He didn't want to know what was inside. But he had to. There was no turning back now. He ripped it open and pulled out the contents, a single photograph. It was a picture of a woman. Her face was clear, her eyes wide with fear, and in the background, there was a shadowy figure that seemed to loom over her. Mark's breath caught in his throat. Who is she? Mark asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The man's eyes glinted in the low light. She's someone who knows too much. Someone who got too close to Victor Dawson. And now, she's gone. Mark's mind spun. The photograph in his hands felt like a punch to the gut. Gone. What did that mean? Had she been killed? Disappeared? You want to know what happened to her? The man asked, leaning in closer. You're going to have to make a choice. The wallet, the money. It's all part of this game. And you're in it now. Mark's pulse raced. He had to know more. He had to understand everything. But as he sat there, staring at the photograph, the gravity of the situation began to sink in. The man was right, he had made a choice, and there was no going back. The question was, would he survive the consequences of that choice? The man stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the tile floor. He turned and started walking toward the door, but before he left, he paused, glancing back at Mark one last time. Remember, he said softly. The only person you can trust is yourself. And then, he was gone. Mark sat there for a long time, the photograph still clenched in his trembling hands. The diner felt colder now, the silence more oppressive. He had been thrown into something far darker than he could have ever imagined. He didn't know what the next step was, but he knew one thing for sure: the man's words weren't just a warning. They were the truth. The only person he could trust was himself. As Mark left the diner and stepped into the cold night air, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking a dangerous path, one that would lead him to places he couldn't yet comprehend. But there was no turning back now.